Hello, it's Paul Wheelock, and welcome to the Debrief live on the Blood Red channel as we react to Liverpool 2, Brighton 2 in the Premier League earlier this afternoon. The Reds look to be heading to a fifth straight win in all competitions when Jordan Henderson scored his first Premier League goal since last December with an excellent finish. And then Sadio Mane made it 7 for the season with a close-range header. Mane then had another goal ruled out for VAR before Brighton halved his deficit before the first half was out. And they equalised midway through the second half when former Liverpool midfielder Adam Lallana set up Leandro Trossard to finish off a lovely move. Jurgen Klopp threw on Diogo Jota and Minamino in an effort to find a winner, but one never truly looked like coming. So that was the quick recap of the match. Matt Addison, you're not long back from Anfield before cracking on with Liverpool.com duty tonight. What was your verdict? What did you make of it all?
Yeah, it was a frustrating one. I think for Liverpool, they were fortunate that, well, they were fortunate and they were unfortunate in the first half. They were fortunate that they were in front, but they should have maybe been a little bit further in front. Sadio Mane's goal rightly ruled out for the handball, but it could have been very different. At 3-0, Brighton would have been absolutely undeserving of that result, but at 3-0, it very much would have been finished. And I think that's the frustration for Liverpool, is that if you go 2-0 up, you don't expect them, particularly at home, but away from home as well, you wouldn't expect them to relinquish a lead like that. And obviously, we know the results elsewhere. Chelsea have won, but Manchester City have slipped up. And even though Liverpool have got a point more than City, it still feels like a massive opportunity missed. I'm sure we'll get into the midfield and all the rest of it in terms of what went wrong. But yeah, it's one of those that maybe a couple of years ago, Liverpool would have just found a way. Even though they didn't play well, they might have won that game anyway. But it just didn't quite happen for them today. But Brighton absolutely deserving of a point. There's probably a case that they could have won it as well, to be fair.
No, that's fair enough, mate. Jurgen Klopp had plenty of praise for Brighton after the game as well. He did make 10 changes to the side that started the 2-0 win at Preston North End in the Carabao Cup in midweek. But you were there up close and personal. I was watching it on a stream, if I can say that, but I was. And to me, as the longer the game went on, I thought Liverpool players looked laggy. Would that be fair enough to say? Do you think there's been some fantastic performances from the first 11 recent weeks? Watford, Atletico, Liverpool, Manchester United. Do we get caught up with the players a little bit today?
Yeah, I mean, it's caught up with Jordan Henderson for a few weeks now. I think he's looked like he needed a rest, but they've just not been able to give him that. The opposite is the case with Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, that he just looks rusty. You never fancy him to get into the team on a regular basis, but that's the only thing realistically that is going to get him back into form. And I thought he did a few good things again, like he always does. He has a couple of good moments, but generally it's just not at the level that you'd expect to see him in the side again, given the choice in future. It's just not quite happening for him. So yeah, I think particularly in midfield, I think at full back as well, that they usually a big creative outlet for Liverpool, but they just didn't quite get the ball into them quick enough. Brighton did well to get back and to press them as well. They forced them back at times, but I don't think there was anyone really that had a good game. I thought Mohamed Salah was very quiet. Obviously finds the back of the net, but was offside. But generally speaking, it just wasn't. It wasn't a performance that you have to put in against a team like Brighton. You know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be intense. They're going to play very similar to Liverpool, but Liverpool have the better individuals, and they just didn't manage to show that really, I don't think, today. They did look tired. It's not really an excuse because there's still players in there that should be a lot fresher. I think that the big thing was that they just took too many touches on the ball at certain times. The centre-backs, it tended to get stuck between their feet at times. Curtis Jones tended to have sort of 3 or 4 touches before moving it on. And, even the full-backs, Brighton set up defensively brilliantly in terms of their back line. But sometimes you just have to put a ball in there and see what happens. And it kind of felt like they were trying to move it into the perfect position rather than just getting a shot away. So, yeah, a few different frustrations, but tiredness is certainly one of them. Obviously, the injuries don't help with that, but you still expect Liverpool to come up with a couple of better moments. I mean, you look back and Brighton had at least as good a chances as what Liverpool did across the course of the game.
You talk about injuries there. Naby Keita's today, really unfortunate. He just can't catch a break, can he, at the moment? He seems to play 2 or 3 really good games, then picks up an injury, misses a couple. There's just no rhythm for him at the moment. And I think it definitely disrupted Liverpool's flow today. And you mentioned Oxlade-Chamberlain came on for him. He did set up Mane's goal, but he didn't particularly convince. But it was a whole midfield today. It just didn't seem to function. I think, in my opinion, Brighton just had the better of it in there the longer the game went on.
Yeah, I think it was a masterstroke from them actually to play with a false nine and to have Leandro Trossard dropping in deep, and Adam Lallana was brilliant. I thought he was kind of the opposite to what Liverpool's midfielders were, which was really energetic, really good with his first touch, which, you know, Liverpool have seen enough of him to know that that's what he's about. But he was just sprinting after everything, looked a lot fresher than the Liverpool midfield. And it's no surprise. I mean, you look at the injuries, obviously Keita went off, that doesn't help. But I think for me, I've just written a piece actually for Liverpool.com on it, that the big issue in terms of the midfield injuries is that you look at the changes that Jurgen Klopp made. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain was one substitute. The other one was Takumi Minamino. And the fact that he left it to 87 minutes and it was, you know, a last roll of the dice, I think pretty much sums up, you know, the options. Obviously, Tyler Morton has impressed him midweek and he was there, but it wouldn't have been fair to put him in and expect him to come up with the answers. So I think you only have to look at the substitutions really for sort of the explanation for where this went wrong. I think if you had Thiago or you had Fabinho or James Milner even, it would have been a very different story. But Liverpool lost Keita. The quality that came on was nowhere near what it needed to be. And Minamino, he did a couple of good things in the couple of minutes that he was on, but it just wasn't a long enough period for him to make a proper impact. And purely and simply, the reason for that is that Jurgen Klopp doesn't trust him. It's not a position he's really played before for Liverpool. I know it's one he's played for Salzburg before, but yeah, it's just not one that we've really seen from him. So yeah, it's a really strange one. They just don't have the personnel. I know a lot of people have been talking about it as a kind of similar situation to the centre-backs last season. It's certainly not that drastic, but to be fair, we're not a million miles away from it. But yeah, hopefully Fabinho's injury isn't too bad. Hopefully Thiago possibly could feature midweek. If that is the case, things can look very different very quickly. But yeah, it just looks like an exhausted area of the pitch at the moment. And unfortunately, Brighton were much fresher.
Jurgen Klopp on Friday called Fabinho's injury complicated, but not too complicated. And he has been called up to the Brazil squad for their internationals coming up in a couple of weeks' time, along with Addison. I think we have to mention Addison today. We've got to put these drop points in context. Liverpool are only 3 points behind the leaders Chelsea, who will come to in a moment. You know, top of the Champions League group, quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup, unbeaten in 24 games. If there's problems, it's good. It's not major problems. But I think it's fair to say, Matt, you know, there's been times this season on this unbeaten run, particularly this season, where Alisson saved Liverpool, hasn't he? Even before the goals today, or either side of the first two, he's coming up with some big moments, isn't he?
Yeah, there's a couple even in that first half. I think there was one from Lallana where he could have maybe put it a little bit more in the corner. But again, it's another of those examples of Addison makes it look a little bit easier than what it is because he's just in the right place at the right time. And he has really put in a couple of really good performances. And you know, generally speaking, he hasn't had to in his Liverpool career. The defence has been so good that you kind of can get away with it a little bit in that regard. But yeah, I think there's been a couple of big moments from him. And you know, we all know the importance. We all know that he's a transformational signing and all the rest of it for Liverpool. But yeah, he's going to help Liverpool in terms of their points total, no doubt, this season, because the defence isn't quite at it. The midfield isn't quite at it at the moment in terms of being able to defend properly. But yeah, when you've got him in goal, I mean, 2 goals conceded is still too many, but it could have been 1 or 2 more if it wasn't for him.
Is it any concern, Matt? You know, again, the results have been fantastic, but I think today was the 5th time that Liverpool have conceded 2 or more goals. I think it's on 4 occasions they conceded 2, and at Brentford it was 3. You know, when you're playing as well as Liverpool are going forward, and there were at times in the first half again today, it was electric. Mane's goal that was disallowed had gone in. You know, I think that's game over at that point. But is there any concern in your mind about the amount of goals Liverpool conceded in case it does dry up at the other end?
I suppose the concern would be in January for AFCON. Obviously, we don't know quite how long Liverpool are going to be without Salah and Mane. But I don't know. I think there's a pretty big argument that if Liverpool's midfield can increase in strength, suddenly the defence looks a lot better as well. I think certainly Fabinho makes a huge difference. And I think he was the one that Liverpool really missed today was, you know, just that presence in front of the midfield. I know there's been certain games where he has been there and it still hasn't been brilliant, but I think if you get one or two key players back and keep key men fit, Liverpool will be there or thereabouts. But we knew that at the start of the season. We knew that if Fabinho was missing for a long time, or Addison was missing for a long time, or Mohamed Salah, or whoever it might be, that could be the difference, because Liverpool don't have that squad depth of the other teams. I think it is very much just a case of getting those key personnel back in, and suddenly it can look very, very different. So I'm not too worried about it yet. Obviously, Brentford was one that you looked at and thought, if they could have just kept that to 2 instead of 3, then they would have won the game. But I don't know. It's a little bit early to be calling that a problem, I think, for me, just partly because of the results and the way that it's been going, but partly because we know that 3 of the centre-backs have been out long-term. I think Virgil van Dijk will get better and better as the season goes on. And, hopefully someone like Ibrahim Konate can improve as well. And I thought he did okay actually today, but not maybe what he did last weekend. Obviously, that was a high bar to live up to. But yeah, I'm not massively worried about it yet. But yeah, I take your point. Without Salah and Mane in the team for, 6, 7, 8 games, what it might be, you might be a little bit more worried then.
We've kind of touched on the midfield and how it's lacking a bit of depth at the moment, given the injuries. And I think it's fair to say that before too long, maybe next summer is maybe an area that will, if not needs strengthening, just maybe needs freshening up a bit. There was a lot of calls for Jurgen Klopp to do that last summer. It didn't happen. It's not really affected Liverpool too much so far. I say the injuries beginning to bite. One player who has been linked with Liverpool is Yves Bissouma. You got a chance to see him today, Matt. What was he like in the flesh? I know he didn't play the full game, and there might have been some better performances, Trossard and Lallana, but were you impressed by what you saw?
Yeah, I thought he was okay. Yeah, he probably wasn't one of the best Brighton players. I thought technically there was a few of them that were much better than him, to be honest. I think Lallana and Trossard were 2 of them, but I always like Solly March as well. I think he's a good player. They've got 1 or 2 really capable players, but yeah, certainly he's one of those that you can kind of see him fitting in. He's probably better as a number 8. He was playing kind of the deepest role for Brighton today. I know that's something that Graham Potter's done a fair bit this season. I actually think he's better being more of a box-to-box player, a bit similar to Wijnaldum, and that he can play that holding role, but I think you maybe get a little bit more out of him if he's a little bit more energetic. So yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? The midfield question, whoever it is, I think there's got to be a couple of additions next summer just to freshen things up. I mean, just to sort of finish on that, I mean, the question mark whenever Liverpool drop points will be, should they have replaced Gini Wijnaldum in the summer? And I think part of the argument that Liverpool made was that it would only be 1 or 2 matches in which that was the case, that they would have needed that player, and it wasn't worth doing it for 1 or 2 matches. But ultimately, if they end up losing the title by a point by the end of this season, maybe it's games like these that they might look back and have a little bit of regret on. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm pretty sure they'll do something next summer, but fingers crossed it wasn't a gamble too far and they don't live to regret not doing it this year.
Yeah, the name Genie was trending on Twitter before for a little bit after the game, along with Thiago. But yeah, I think, as I say, we've got to put it into context. Liverpool are second, 3 points behind Chelsea, who took advantage of Liverpool's slip up by winning 3-0 at Newcastle. But there was the boost of Manchester City losing for the second time this season. This time 2-0 at home to Crystal Palace. As we're recording this, I think Manchester United just gone up 3-0 up at Tottenham Hotspur, which will push them, I think, level on points with West Ham and Arsenal in 4th. But I think it's fair to say we still expect, even if United do recover from the humbling they had against Liverpool last weekend, that it's probably going to be a 3-horse race for the title. Does that give you a bit of comfort? I think we all knew Chelsea weren't going to go away, but City again, that's a second defeat, isn't it? Is it both at home? No, it was at Tottenham, wasn't it? They dropped points at home to Southampton. They don't look infallible anymore, City, do they?
No, that's the positive, isn't it? I think right now it only adds to the frustration, because you think if Liverpool could have held on, you really would have been talking about that as being, a momentous one. You think back a couple of years ago, I think they had a couple of games in a row where they dropped points. There was that shock home defeat. Wasn't that to Crystal Palace as well a couple of seasons ago? I think that was it was around Christmas time, I think, wasn't it, that one? But you would look at it in that way, I think, if Liverpool had won. But without Liverpool having won, maybe it doesn't quite feel the same. But yeah, look, ultimately City have shown that they can drop points at certain times, and yeah, I think it is a point gain for Liverpool, but it should have been more. And I think it's hard to look across at Manchester City and say, well, they've slipped up when Liverpool have as well. It doesn't quite feel like the right time to be making that point. But yeah, it is promising. I think the frustration is that Chelsea have obviously won, and it's not just Manchester City that Liverpool have got to compete with at the moment. It's Chelsea as well. So I think that they will all slip up at certain times this season. Chelsea will have their moments where they do the same thing, and it's just a case of who can be the most consistent. Liverpool will be up there, but I think City and Chelsea, it's going to be very, very tight at the top.
Certainly will. Just one final question before we let you go, mate. The disappointment of today will soon maybe be forgotten if and go to beat Atletico Madrid on Wednesday in the Champions League. We all know if Liverpool can do that, it would book their place in the knockout stages with 2 games to spare, which could have added benefits for the Premier League title bid. How do you play that one, Matt? Having been at Anfield today, and we've said some players look leggy, there's clearly injury problems in midfield. Does Jurgen Klopp kind of ask the players to go again, or do you think he'll freshen it up?
I think in defence and attack, it's probably going to be very similar. In midfield, it probably has to be similar because I'm not quite sure who is going to be back. I think if Thiago is back, I think that's a game that would suit him for sure. I know Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain had a great game against Atletico a couple of seasons ago, but I don't know. It would be a bit of a shock, I think, if he started, unless there was nobody else to come in and play. Obviously, Keita with the hamstring injury, he'll be out. Milner, Harvey Elliott, all the rest of them are still not there. So there's not loads of changes that Liverpool can make. But I think they'll want to put right what they haven't done today. They'll want to put in a bit of a performance. And if they can beat Atletico Madrid, short term, it might take a bit more effort. But of course, then it would mean that the last 2 games that they can make changes. So yeah, I think it's worth going big and going again and going strong on Wednesday night to get the job done. Because if they can beat Atletico Madrid, as I say, they can then make the changes further down the line. So it might be a little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain.
We'll have all the build-up to the Atletico Madrid match on the Blood Red channel in the coming days. And if you haven't already checked them out, you can now watch Jurgen Klopp's and Graham Potter's post-match press conferences in full on the channel. And we'll have more analysis of what we've watched this afternoon on Monday's Blood Red podcast. But until then, it's bye for now.